The Trump administration has issued a halt to nearly all existing foreign aid, with the exception of that flowing to Israel and Egypt. That's according to a State Department memo seen by US media outlets. The freeze stems from an executive order signed by Trump within hours of taking office, ordering a 90-day pause in foreign development assistance in order to review efficiency and consistency with his foreign policy. The order risks freezing billions of dollars of life-saving aid, including to a program that supplies HIV treatment in Africa. The United States is the largest single aid donor in the world, having doled out some $72 billion in 2023. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now by Liz Schuler, US policy analyst in Washington, D.C. Liz, great to see you as always. So the US provides more foreign aid globally than any other country on earth. So NGOs, major humanitarian organizations, are warning that this freeze is essentially life-threatening for millions of people. So what's the reasoning for this decision by the Trump administration?
As I'm sure many of you have heard already, this last week, Trump has absolutely issued a flurry of executive orders. And so some of that is playing a part here. It's a little bit, there is a concept in the American public that when things are struggling at home, why are we funding aid to foreign countries? They have this misconception that aid and the economics, stability of our own country domestically are tied together. So in some ways, Trump is signaling to his base, I'm fulfilling a campaign promise. Right now, one of the pictures on his Facebook page is promises made, promises kept. So a cynic could say that this is a theater. This is about signaling without a lot of heft behind it that, look, I'm slashing unnecessary spending. I'm taking this seriously, and I'm going to help strengthen domestics abroad. I also think it all plays a little bit into the bluster he's already done before the election about holding some countries over the barrel with tariffs and things like that. So the foreign aid is kind of getting caught up in all of that political motivation.
Now, Liz, two countries are still going to receive aid, though, from the United States. That's Israel and Egypt. What's your take on that?
I was not surprised, but curious when I heard that it was Israel and Egypt, why they specifically were exempt. Right now, there's Congress members lobbying for Ukraine to be exempt, but was notably not. I think there is probably a stipulation in existing treaties around this foreign aid. As much as his executive order carries weight, it is still hemmed in some ways. So there could be provisions within, for example, the ceasefire we were just talking about, providing this aid. Additionally, Trump is very strong against Iran. And so this could be a conversation he's had with Israel about how do we ensure we keep Iran at bay and we keep Iran in check, and that will be continuing to provide critical aid to that area.
All right. So considering what this memo says, where on the planet will this hit hardest?
It will hit hardest in the areas where it always hits the hardest, in kind of some of the more lower income and struggling areas of Africa. There is so much struggle right now in Lebanon and in Syria and in Sudan. Notably, they did not halt aid to food programs, which is very much needed. But they mentioned the HIV medicine, which is PEPFAR. It was an initiative started by George W. Bush, and is widely bipartisan for the last nearly 20 years, and has been massively successful on providing life-saving aid in the form of medical care, both preventative and treatment for HIV across Africa. And I've already seen statements issued by organizations saying people could die if this truly happens. Thousands of lives are at stake. And so I see that also will turn their entire economies and regional stability upside down as well.
Liz, we're going to have to leave it there. We'll be keeping a close eye on this story. Of course, it's been a pretty busy week so far with regards to the Trump administration. Liz Schuler joining us from Washington, D.C. tonight, US policy analyst. Always good to have you on the show.
Thank you.
For more, I am joined by Chris Beyrer, director of the Duke Global Health Institute and an epidemiologist. Chris, thank you for joining us. Now, you've been on the front lines in the fight against HIV/AIDS and more recently against COVID-19. How will this freeze in U.S. foreign aid cost lives?
Well, we're very concerned about the freeze. Certainly, as you said, Melissa, the U.S. is the largest single donor. The PEPFAR program, which is the treatment program for HIV/AIDS, not just in Africa, but primarily in Africa, right now supplies antiviral therapy to over 20 million people, including close to 600,000 children living with HIV. You can't really pause antiviral therapy. It's not like other treatments, because if you stop for 90 days or 180 days, which is a concern that people think this may last that long, you run the risk of drug resistance. And then you can't start people again on the same meds they were on. So this really is a major concern. But it's not just PEPFAR. The president's malaria initiative has been put on pause. The contribution to the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria. The Pandemic Preparedness Fund, which is, of course, extremely important. We have a number of emerging infections, bird flu going on right now, a Marburg outbreak in East Africa, Mpox outbreak in Central Africa. So pausing humanitarian assistance and pausing these kinds of programs in our world is incredibly dangerous. Infectious diseases don't take a pause. HIV doesn't pause. Hunger doesn't pause. We're also, of course, supporting a huge number of humanitarian efforts with USAID funding, and that also has been paused. And that includes humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. So the only two carve-outs, the Secretary of State can carve out exceptions to these pauses. The only two that Secretary Rubio has done so far are for Israel.
Chris, we have limited time left, but quick question. How are the organizations responding to this freeze? Are there readily available, at least emergency funds they can tap into?
Well, there are certainly some emergency funds in country, and of course, we rely very much on our partners. I would say what many in the scientific community are working on and are asking for is a carve-out from the Secretary for PEPFAR in particular, because it provides life-saving therapy to so many millions of people and millions, hundreds of thousands of children. But certainly, we're in a very challenging environment because all the federal agencies have also been told not to communicate with the public. So we're operating to a significant degree in the dark here.
Chris Beyrer, director of the Duke Global Health Institute, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.